What if the speed of light was 30 miles an hour?
What if Earth had two suns?
Which cereal mascot would win in a fight?
What if everyone lived underground?
What if it
What
rained
if money
food?
grew on
What
trees?
if pigs could fly?
I don't know if that would actually happen.
It's much easier to store a unicycle than to store a horse.
Hello everybody and welcome to Absurd Hypotheticals, the show where we overthink dumb questions so you don't have to. I'm your host Marcus Lehner, and I'm joined here today by Chris Yee and Ben Storms. Say hi, guys.
Hey, I'm Chris.
Hey, I'm Ben.
Guys, today we have a grab bag question, the power grab bag, which I don't remember if I bothered explaining what it was in the preview.
Probably
You
not.
did
but-
not. So it could be multiple things.
Yeah, no, not superpowers, not like people named powers.
Not
We're talking
exponentials.
about, yeah, not exponentials either.
That would have been fun, though. Put that on the list.
But a better way to phrase, we basically what we did is we each took a different fill in the blank for this fill in the blank question. What if everything was powered by blank? So everything in the world that is powered by all our good dinosaur juices and like solar power and all that yada yada. We all picked one specific thing and said, what if that was the only source? So Chris, I'm going to let you start off. What question did you answer?
So I started off with the most basic source of power that you can get, and that is human power. What if everything was human powered? So my first thought when thinking about this was just like the Flintstone cars, like Fred Flintstone running in a car and that's how you power your car. Obviously, that's not what we would actually do. We do have ways that are human powered already to get places. The most obvious one is bicycles. So professional bicycle riders can maintain 25 miles per hour on flat ground, which is pretty fast. It's not like a substitute for cars, really, but it's decent.
Yeah, 25 is not, that's faster than I would expect.
Yeah, well, that's for a professional biker too, so it might be a little lower for like normal people, but it's still pretty good. But there are some like better versions of bikes. So there's a thing called a velomobile.
I was really hoping you were going to say tricycle.
So velomobile is basically just a bike that's enclosed in like it has an enclosure and it's protected from the weather and stuff, and it has like better aerodynamics. And there are some like electricity assisted velomobiles, but there are also ones that are purely human powered. And the enclosure actually adds a little bit of weight to it. So like if you're going uphill, then it's a slower climb up hills than like a normal bike. But if you're going downhill or on flat ground, then the better aerodynamics helps increase your top speed. I actually watched a video of a guy going, he reached 68 miles per hour on one of these things, which is pretty good in my opinion. That's actually a pretty good replacement. Like, obviously cars can go faster than that, but it's like within the range. And these are actually pretty street friendly too. So that's driving on land. But what about like other types of transportation, like in the water? So obviously we have other boats that don't like run on motors and stuff. We have sailboats, but those are wind powered, so that doesn't count for us. But we also have like any type of boat that requires paddling. So like if you have an oar or a paddle, and a canoe or a kayak, things like that,
Like
are
a paddle
human-powered.
boat.
A paddle boat. I couldn't remember if that was if that's like what you called it.
a real thing or not.
It's confusing. There are some that are steam powered and also some that are foot powered. So you have to be very careful when you say it. But yes, a paddle boat.
Yeah. And then there are vehicles that like go underwater too that are pedal powered. They're very similar to just like a bike where you just pedal and then it makes you go underwater. There's a bunch of them. So like translating movement underwater is actually pretty easy for manpower. So we have that too. But what about air? What about traveling in the air? Because planes are a big part of our society too, and we would want to fly places. So we have gliders. That's, I guess, man-powered, kind of. I mean, it uses the air when you're gliding, I guess, but I still count it as man-powered.
The power there is coming from you climbing up something. So I would say yes,
Yeah.
that counts. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It does require you climbing up something for it to work. It can't take off from the ground like a plane. But there are some human-powered vehicles that can take off. So the first officially authenticated takeoff from a human-powered aircraft was in 1961. It is from the the SUMPAC, SUMPAC, which stands for Southampton University Man-Powered Aircraft. It's pedal-powered as well, just like all our other stuff. And the pedals power a two-bladed propeller. And this vehicle actually won something that's called a Kremer Prize. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Kremer, maybe? Kremer? I don't know. But the Kremer Prize, it basically just awards money prizes to like different innovators of human-powered flight. So there's a bunch of them. Another Kremer Prize was awarded in 1979 when the Gossamer Albatross, which is the name of an aircraft, flew from England to France purely on human power, which is pretty impressive in my books. So we have technology, we have like human-powered things that can travel between countries. We don't have anything that can like travel across the ocean yet, but there actually is a prize for anyone that does achieve that. So if we do that, then they'll get the money. But we can go from country to country.
Well, England to France is technically over the ocean, right? A little bit of it.
I guess it depends on... Yeah.
Well, it's hard to go from England to anywhere without crossing over the ocean.
So we have modes of transportation, but that's not the only technology I was looking at. I wanted to figure out, because we have like all this other... We have like phones and TVs and everything that uses electricity. And in my interpretation of this question, I was trying to decide if I could use electricity or not. And what I landed on is that if the electricity is generated from humans, like if you have a crank-powered flashlight or something and you crank it and then you turn it on, that counts because the source of the energy is from a human. We just need to store the human-generated energy somehow. So basically, like, can we do that crank-powered flashlight on a larger scale and have like a walking wheel sort of thing and like connect it to a generator or something and store it to power our society? And we've done similar things to like this in the past. So we've had treadmill sorts of things, specifically in prisons. So they called them penal treadmills, I think. Penal
God.
Treadmills. Like penalty, but without the T. I don't know if you pronounce
it's
that.
the penal pedal.
Penal or penal. But they basically use these treadmills that people walked on to mill corn or pump water. And they used prisoners to walk on them, obviously. And these were used in the early Victorian period in Britain. They held up to like 25 prisoners on one wheel, and they would have the prisoners walk 6 hours a day on these. Now, you could theoretically hook this up to a generator and do the same thing and store some energy, and it achieves the same thing. So, obviously, this was a punishment, and we don't necessarily want to punish our citizens. So I was looking into whether there were like less punishing ways of doing this. And there is a technology called PaveGen. So PaveGen is basically a pavement technology that converts footsteps of pedestrians into electricity when they step on it. And the way it works is when you step on it, it compresses the slab about 5 millimeters. And they were a little vague. I guess they're trying to keep the technology a little bit secret, but they said it involves electromagnetic induction whenever someone steps on it, and that's how it generates power. Now, this technology has been criticized for its very, very low output in energy, so...
A valid criticism for an energy-producing product. It
Yeah.
doesn't produce much energy.
Well, I mean, they have installed these in a few places, like sports stadiums and like running trails and stuff.
Oh, I'm not saying you can't use them. I'm just saying it's a valid criticism. It's like criticizing a plane for not flying very high. They should go higher.
Yeah. But one of the sources I found said that 54,000 steps generates only 0.06 kilowatt hours of power, which is very low. And then another calculation I found said that 4 hours of walking on the PaveGen stuff generates 0.02% of a person's energy needs. So obviously, this isn't very good. And this kind of highlights the main issue with depending on human power. We've actually kind of mentioned this before in previous episodes, that human power is very inefficient. So, like, an elite cyclist can produce close to 400 watt-hours of mechanical power, but that's like an elite cyclist. An average adult can produce around 50 to 150 watt-hours. And over a longer shift, like an 8-hour shift or so, an average adult can sustain around 75 watt-hours. Now, the mechanical part of this is actually kind of is pretty efficient. So modern racing bicycles have a greater than 95% mechanical efficiency in utilizing this power. But the problem you run into is the conversion into electricity. So we've actually covered this, Ben covered this in episode 99 when he looked at hamster power. And this next part, my main source of research was basically just listening to Ben talk.
I'm so sorry you had to do that. That's
Yeah, I try to avoid doing that as much as possible.
penal is what it is.
So he said that bike generators have a 10 to 20% loss in energy. Storing the energy in a battery has around a 10 to 35% loss. And then converting that energy from the battery back into alternating current has around 5 to 15% loss. So that's a total of 42 to 67% loss. Now, he looked at charging a phone. So he said that charging a phone was 19.2 watt hours. It required that much. And he said that it would take one hamster 11.3 days to charge a phone. Humans are better than that, as I would expect. So if we assume the same 42% loss that Ben assumed in his answer, the average adult can generate 43.5 watt hours of power. And that means that a human can charge a phone in about 10 and a half hours, which isn't too bad, I guess. It's less than a day. It's less than half a day. But that's just a phone. Obviously, we need more than that. So I looked at the power consumption of like an average household, which Ben also actually looked at, and I just took his number. So,
So Ben, you feel good about your answer being on blast here?
I'm so glad I was able to help with your research so much, Chris.
yeah, save me some time. So he said that home power consumption averaged around 10,972 kilowatt hours per year, or 30 kilowatt hours per day. And for hamsters, you need 17,647 hamsters. For humans, we only need 690 people to power a home. So that's pretty good, I guess, if you compare it to hamsters.
Are we?
I guess I have no reason to compare it to hamsters, but it makes me look better. Obviously, this is not a good option because we don't have that many people to power just one home. So we kind of need to just like reduce our power consumption. So I tried to look into the different categories of power consumption that we have and to see if we can like get rid of any of them. And according to the Energy Information Administration, they broke it up into categories. So 16% of our energy is used for space cooling, 15% for space heating, 12% for water heating, 6% for refrigeration, 5% for clothes drying or dryers, 4% for lighting, and 4% for TVs and related equipment. Now, pretty much all that stuff is very important except for the TV. I guess you could probably get rid of the dryers too and maybe just air dry your clothes. But that's only getting rid of 8% of our energy consumption. Now, they did have this other category that was just other uses, and that was 31%. And in that, they included electric devices, like small electric devices, heating elements, exterior lights, outdoor grills, pool and spa heaters, backup electricity generators, and motors. So we could probably get rid of all those too if we wanted to. So total, that's a 39% reduction. Still not nearly enough what we need. I think in general, we just need to reduce our overall power consumption, like spread out through all these categories. And we would have to reduce it a lot. I don't know how reasonable that is, but we'd have no other options. We just have to do it. But in order to increase like our efficiency, I wanted to see like, because we're saying human power, but all this power actually comes from the food that we eat. That's where all of our energy comes from. So I wanted to look at what was the most, like, how much would we actually have to eat to do this? So I was going to use the chicken nuggets as our baseline food because in our recent Patreon episode, we talked about not using chicken nuggets in a while. So I wanted to do that. But the problem is that chicken nuggets are very highly processed and they require energy to make, which is kind of counterproductive to what we're trying to do. We want to use as little energy as possible when making our food. So I wanted to try to come up with a new baseline food that can help fuel us. Ideally something that doesn't require any cooking or processing and something that's high in nutrients. And I found a spreadsheet from the USDA that it seems to include every single food ever.
What? I want it. Send this to me.
So I opened it and I got a message that said there's too much data for Excel to handle. And then I went to the scroll bar on the right and I like dragged it the smallest sliver I possibly could, and it brought me down to row 4,000. And then I went down to the very bottom just to see how many rows there were. And there were 1,048,576 rows. And then after that, there were no more rows. It wasn't even like blank rows. The rows just didn't exist anymore.
So there's at least 1 million foods on the Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, Excel spreadsheet. And I was going to use this spreadsheet to figure out like calorie counts and stuff and like what had what nutrients, but the labels on these spreadsheets weren't very clear and it seemed very convoluted. I couldn't actually figure out what the numbers meant, so I ditched it.
Also, what would your computer do if you tried to sort? It would just break.
Yeah, I don't know. So I went with a different tactic, and I just decided to look up what diets like endurance runners go for. So obviously, endurance runners need a lot of calories, and they actually need a lot of carbs. They need a high-carb diet. So according to the International Sports Sciences Association, they suggest 70% of their calories come from carbs for endurance training. And they suggest 700 grams of carbs for someone who weighs around 70 kilograms, which is like 154 pounds. Now, carbs have 4 calories per gram, so that means they're suggesting 2,800 calories of carbs per day for endurance training, which is a lot of carbs. So I looked up a list of high, like, carb-dense foods. I found a list on Healthline. So on their list, the top 3 were quinoa, oats, and buckwheat. The problem with those is that you need to boil them to eat them, and that consumes power. And as I said before, trying not to do that. But number 4 on the list was bananas. And bananas, you don't need to cook, you don't need to process or anything, you just pull it off the tree and eat it. And a medium-sized banana has 27 grams of carbs, which means that we would need to eat 26 bananas a day, which I think is actually pretty doable. It's not too many, just a little more than 1 an hour, unless you go to sleep. Then I guess that's not true. But yeah, you can spread it out. And you also need like protein and fat too, which bananas don't have, but you could just like eat nuts or something. But the main part of your diet will be the bananas. So if everything was human powered, everyone would eat a lot of bananas. That was my takeaway.
That's bananas.
D-A-N-A-N-A-S.
Ben, what did you do?
So I looked at what if everything was steam powered, getting us to our glorious steampunk, I guess, present in this hypothetical. So the first thing I'm going to figure out was really, what does it mean to be steam powered? Because technically, a good portion of our power currently is steam powered. So coal and nuclear plants, which combine to make about 40% of our power generation in the US, they're just using either burning coal or nuclear fission to heat water, which turns into steam, which turns into a generator. So technically, a lot of our power is steam powered. We're already living in the awesome steampunk present. Side note that's kind of unrelated, I also, in the course of this, found out how natural gas power generation works. And they're basically just huge engines that inject gas into pressurized air that moves hundreds of miles per hour, which they then ignite to spin a turbine, which is super metal and awesome, but not steam powered, but still cool. And I wanted to share it.
Yeah, this steam power is cool and all, but really where it's at is
natural gas, propane and propane accessories, my friends. Anyway, so looking at it this way, we can all agree isn't really the spirit of the question. No one's going to look at a nuclear plant and say, yeah, that's steam powered, even if it's technically accurate. So what we're really looking at here is things that are using steam to do, a mechanical process. So if we wanted to have quote unquote steam powered electric generation, it would be literally it would basically be a coal power plant, but we wouldn't say that because it's going to make a question too easy. But beyond that, we'd also have just things like, say, a steam engine that is literally using steam to, move pistons to move something. So some things, doing things this way is very easy. Example, steam trains. We've all seen Thomas the Tank Engine. We know this is a real thing.
Why would you pick the fictional character to prove it's real?
Hey, it's who knows? It's fine. Whatever. Just don't worry about it. So obviously steam engines are a thing, but turns out they are way worse than non-steam alternative options. Every week, a steam locomotive uses its own weight in coal and water. A steam engine, so when you're using a steam engine, you are, boiling water and pressurizing it so you get this steam that can use to do work. And that means that at the start of when you're going to use it, you have to take a bunch of time to let that heat up initially. So for, say, a steam locomotive, that time is hours. For like a small locomotive, it'll be like 1 to 3 hours. Large ones can be, 6 to 10 hours. And if you want to stop the train, you have to let off some of that pressure. So you're going to have to repressurize it afterwards. It won't be that full time because the water will still be hot. And the some of that time will also be heating up, the boiler itself and sort of the space around it so it maintains its temperature. So you don't have to redo all that, but you will have to take breaks every time it stops to reheat and pressurize your boiler.
Ben, I need you to write an action movie where there's a plot line of they're making their escape and they find an old steam train. They're like, oh yeah, this is the one. And then they find out it takes 6 hours to start.
It's just like a last stand as they're waiting several hours to make the train go. I love it.
Yeah, the guy hot wires all the things and, gets the coal and does the whole, like, science-y montage. And it's like, all right, we're home free now, boys. It's like, okay, we just got to wait till Wednesday.
That was the mistake. He was hot wiring. He should have been hot watering.
I think we just wrote the next sequel to Speed.
Sure did. I feel like there's like 8 billion. Okay, you know what? We're not talking about train movies now. Mark doesn't see any movies. It's not worth it. So they also were very inefficient. Only about 5% of the potential energy of the fuel actually winds up going towards driving the wheels, as opposed to around 25% for a diesel engine. So very, very inefficient. And they just require just like a huge amount of maintenance. Due to all the maintenance and cleaning the boiler and things like that, a steam locomotive would actually only be available for about 35% of the time, as opposed to like 95% availability for a diesel engine. So we could have steam trains, but they would be bad because steam trains are bad is the answer, it turns out. But, steam engines we all knew, or steam locomotives we all knew were a thing. What about things that we didn't necessarily knew already were steam powered sometimes technically, like cars? So technically, steam cars were actually a thing before internal combustion engine cars. At the start of the 20th century, over half the cars in the US, which admittedly was not that many cars, but were steam powered. And in 1906, the land speed record was set by a steam car called the Stanley Rocket with a speed of 127 miles per hour, which is pretty fast, faster than I would have expected for a steam powered car. And apparently, steam cars were actually great. Unlike a piston-based internal combustion engine, they gave constant pressure, which meant you didn't actually need a gearbox or a clutch to drive them. They just, it was just super easy to drive. They were great. There was, admittedly, a few minutes for the boiler to heat up, but that wasn't that big of a deal. It's like when you take your, start a car in the winter, you have to let it heat up a little bit. The real thing that sunk steam cars was cost, actually. Because when Ford started making their, mass-produced cars, by like 1918, the Model T was about 6 times cheaper than the Stanley Steamer, which was the most popular steam car at the time. And also they had to be like really heavy because of, that big boiler on there. So they kind of just disappeared at that point, and they have not been seen since. Modern steam cars not really a thing. I saw an article talking about how maybe they'd come back because of like environmental reasons, but it seems pretty unlikely because most of the issues with steam cars still there, and also oil companies have $1 gajillion. And they don't want that to happen. So, probably not going to happen. There was, however, recently a new steam-powered land speed record set. In 2009, someone hit 151 miles per hour using a car that burned liquid petroleum gas to heat 12 suitcase-sized boilers up to like 750 degrees Fahrenheit. And that record they broke was the one that was set in 1906, which is pretty insane. It took 103 years to break that record, which is also probably the most damning reason I don't expect steam cars to ever do anything, is that it took them a century to break a record for the speed of a steam car.
I don't think it took a record to beat because it's just so hard to improve on the tech. I think the guy beat the steam land speed record, and the reaction was, who's still competing?
Also that is also part of it. Not gonna lie.
It's like, I built the biggest guillotine. Nobody's building them anymore. We don't use them.
We could technically have steam cars. They just, once again, would not be very good. I looked into steam aircraft. There is a Wikipedia page called Steam Aircraft. It is a list of 19 projects that all have some variation of there is no record of a flight being made, or a working prototype was never developed, or where was the really good one? There was one that there was an article written in a paper about a steam-powered plane being developed in Berlin. It was written in a Czechoslovakian paper, and then the reporter was arrested and no one ever heard of the project again. That's kind of how all these ones went. So steam-powered aircraft didn't really happen.
Do you know what he was arrested for?
It didn't say. Let's see. Can I find
Witchcraft.
the only source was some it was like a magazine from the 1930s, and I could not, find any like actual sourcing of the arrest. But I mean, it was in Germany in the 1930s, so I figured they could figure out some reason. But yeah, so really the real reason that there aren't any steam-powered aircraft that have been successful is just that boilers are heavy and not great at producing power in a way that'll give you the power to weight ratio you need for flight. So there have been some made that are, sort of like very early aircraft that could do sort of hops, but no sustained flight. Aside from, technically, I think there were a couple of more, Zeppelin style ones, but it was just not an particularly effective way to actually do that, and people stopped doing it. But technically, we might be able to have Zeppelins, but no actual like planes. So this is kind of how things go for large things just overall, right? Is generally we can do it aside from flight, but you're going to need heat up time up front. It's going to be less powerful just because there are limitations on the power you can generate through steam. Almost always going to be heavier than our current options. And just, we could make it work, but it'll be worse. Where things get tricky is once you get to things that are smaller than where it's practical to have their own, full-size steam boiler on them, like, say, a cell phone. If you wanted to have a portable phone that is steam powered, and we're not going to have just, a battery or something, what you're going to need to have is a portable steam boiler generator system you carry with you, either wheeling it around or on your back or something. That is, heating water, pressurizing it, pushing out the steam, using it to run a generator, and then running your phone off of that. And technically, we do already have something that is a effectively a steam, boiler that is pressurizing and heating water that you carry on your back or on wheels, and that is a steam cleaner. That's pretty much what they're doing. Is they're taking water, heating it to not as hot as necessarily a boiler would for like a steam engine, but using that water to then bring it out pressurized and clean carpets or whatever. And I tried my best to calculate how much power you could generate with a steam cleaner. And man, I tried so hard. Guys. But that math is really complicated, and it's really hard to get information about how powerful a steam cleaner is.
Yeah, because once it's powerful enough to, turn water into steam, no one really cares anymore.
Right, that's kind of all you have to do with it. So you couldn't just use one of our existing steam cleaners because those are all, either plugged into the wall or have a battery. So you'd probably have to have, a coal burner or something on it, which seems, not going to lie, incredibly dangerous, but technically possible, I think. I am a little doubtful you might be able to, with an entire, like suitcase-sized or backpack-sized steam engine, power like a single phone, but it does not seem particularly practical or safe or smart. So we're probably not going to have anything, machinery that's smaller than like, I don't know, a motorcycle size. So that's kind of our world. So everything's going to take a while to start up, and we're not going to have phones unless you carry around your own generator. And it's going to kind of suck, but technically works. So there you go. Marcus, what'd you do?
Yeah, so Ben, you're kind of running into similar issues that I was thinking about. So the one I did is, what if everything was nuclear powered? Speaking of carrying a whole bunch of fuel with you. So big scale, like this one is, of the ones we picked, I guess steam is also pretty used elsewhere if you consider all the current power plants that use turbines as steam powered. But this one is pretty much the most reasonable because some countries have actually already pretty much committed to this because they don't want to compete with all these other big, scary countries with big, fancy armies for oil. France, for example, just went ahead and built like 60 nuclear reactors in the 70s and 80s, and now 80% of their power comes from nuclear energy. So you can definitely have your primary infrastructure be these nuclear power plants. And my personal opinion, I'll preface this, my personal opinion is that there should be a lot more nuclear power around. But you run into the problem of scaling down because, kind of similar to you, but I didn't want to just say all the power is generated in the nuclear power plant and you just fill a bunch of batteries and then you just take those batteries and put them in all your devices and that's how you do it. So I started looking at how small can you get a nuclear reactor so that you can power your smaller devices, like what's in your house, that kind of thing. So kind of the main place that they make small nuclear reactors is in space stuff. And the first kind of mid-sized, what I'm calling a reactor, is called the Topaz. This was made by the Russians. It stands for the Thermionic Experiment with Conversion in Active Zone, which doesn't spell topaz, but it does in Russian. But they didn't tell me the Russian. I couldn't find the Russian words, so I have just the English translation of the acronym. So this guy, it basically looks like the head of a nuclear bomb. It's just like one of those conish space shapes. It weighs about 700 pounds. So you could put it on wheels and or a small vehicle and kind of drag it around places, or it could be just a fixture in your house. It's kind of comparable to a boiler that you'd have in your basement. And so this reactor was capable of delivering 5 kilowatts of power, and that's off of 26 pounds of fuel. So the fuel doesn't add too much weight to it. The 5 kilowatts of power, just kind of put in perspective, a home outlet is typically 1.8 to 2.4 kilowatts. So you have roughly 3 regular outlets worth of power from this 700-pound unit here, which is not terrible. It works. It's not, like I said, it's not perfect, but if you have 3 outlets worth of power, you can make that stretch. And if you have 3 to 5 of these in your home, you might not have as many outlets as you do nowadays, but you could probably split it between devices if they're not all on at the same time. I figure it's definitely doable just to have these, and you get the fuel, you put it in there, your house is pretty much covered, no problem. But of course, like Ben mentioned, you get down to your cell phone. How can you have a nuclear powered cell phone? You can't have a 710-pound cell phone. That's ridiculous. And so I'm like, here's my problem I'm gonna solve. And then my research screwed me over because they make some pretty small stuff that's nuclear powered. For example, you can get, well, not anymore, but they used to do plutonium powered pacemakers. So once you get to a small enough scale with devices, you're not actually using the fission reaction. So the way the nuclear power plants typically work is they work by fission. You have a bunch of uranium in water, or if you have a fancy one, in molten salt and metals, and you hit it with a neutron that you shoot from a beam, and that splits up them and they explode and they create this chain reaction that generates a whole bunch of energy. Or you can use what they call it a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, which basically means, hey, radioactive stuff just is hot. And it uses the heat generated by the natural decay of a radioactive element and just converts that heat into power. The cool thing about this being in the pacemakers is that the pacemaker can last 88 years on the little bit of plutonium that's put in it. Meanwhile, a regular pacemaker has a battery that you have to replace. You have to have a minor. I wouldn't go so far as call it a procedure, but you have to get it every 5 to 6 years. You have to get the battery replaced. So you do have to update that pacemaker. The ones with the nuclear ones, just put them in and forget it. And I was kind of looking into why they don't use them anymore. And it wasn't because they didn't really, they didn't work, or they were, filling people with radiation or anything like that. It was really just because the electrical ones let you control the output of power a bit better, where you could set it, to respond to your heartbeats. Once the tech got more sophisticated to respond to your body, they were able to do fancy things with the electric ones, while the radioactive one just was a constant pace. It just did one thing. You couldn't really modulate it. There was also some talk about cremation. So the pacemakers were designed to survive cremation, but apparently when some of them that they produced wouldn't survive the cremation process. They were supposed to go up to those heats, but they, the protective casings, all that, were insufficient. So it became a thing of, well, we don't know which ones aren't going to survive the cremation process. So basically we're not going to put them in so that we don't have this problem later. And it actually became I don't know how big an issue it was in the ultimate decisions compared to just tech improvements, but they didn't want to cremate people with nuclear powered pacemakers in case the casing, broke up. So really at every scale the nuclear power is working. Cars and vehicles are actually the weird in-between of wanting to be a full-on reactor and small enough to be a low power device. The 710-pound reactor is kind of not quite enough power for a vehicle. And so I was trying to look into if anyone made a nuclear power cars, and basically just found general concurrence of, yeah, you could definitely make one in theory. And we've made a bunch of transportable small nuclear reactors for different types of things that are similar to, like, the power needs of a car, but no one's bothered to make an actual car. Although Ford did come out with a concept for a nuclear-powered car called the Ford Nucleon, and that was back in 1950.
Ooh, that's a cool name.
Yeah, it was basically it's not a station wagon, but basically a station wagon, but like the back is like more pickup shaped, and it's got a big circular turbine was kind of how they had it for the nuclear power generation.
Just based on the name, I picture Homer Simpson's design for a car.
It's not that. But really they don't use them for cars because the shielding for it gets heavy, and also if you get into an accident, that's problematic. So scaling up and down, I really wasn't running into any real problems with the nuclear power. Like, we have the technology to do it. The question then was, do we have enough fuel? Do we have enough uranium? So according to Scientific American, there's 5.5 million metric tons of uranium that have been discovered, and an estimated 10.5 million more tons, making up 16 total of uranium that has been undiscovered. So we know about where 5.5 is. Based on what we know about, we can probably find 10.5 more that's readily mineable. Our current uranium use in the world is 70,000 metric tons per year, meaning at the current rates, we have a 230-year supply of uranium available to us. Nuclear power makes up about 10% of the world's current energy usage, so if we multiply our usage rate by 10 to get to 100% nuclear power, we only have 23 years of uranium, which is not a whole lot. There's stuff we can do, though. First off, simply upgrading our existing plants to modern technology and practices reduces their energy consumption by about half. Fuel consumption by about half. So they can be twice as efficient just upgrading the modern tech. This includes the, enriching the uranium further before you use it. And also there's actually post processes where you can kind of separate the uranium and plutonium waste products and recover some of that as new fuel. So taking those two together, this puts us up to 46 years of fuel, which again is not super great. We're going to need a bit more uranium. The biggest source of untapped uranium is actually the ocean. So there is uranium dissolved in the ocean that combines with oxygen molecules to make these uranyl ions. So basically just they're floating in the ocean, and basically the comparison they draw is it's about equivalent to a single grain of salt in a liter of water. But they actually do have methods for extracting these uranyl ions out of the water. The ions are actually positively charged. So using some fancy, materials and methods, they keep updating them. It was kind of a bunch of stuff that didn't make too much sense to me. But the takeaway is that you can stick a big stick in the water with a with a negative charge that's appropriate to attract specifically these uranyl ions and kind of trawl the ocean to pick up uranium.
Are you sure that urinal is the right word for that?
I was going to ask.
Yeah, it's spelled URANYL.
Okay.
So it's not urinal, it's uranil, or
Urinal.
Yeah, it's you gotta say it with less embarrassment.
You said it confidently, so I bought it.
Yeah, no, that's how you pronounce it. So these urinal ions in the ocean is full of urinals. And as we said many times in the show, the ocean is big. So you have a single grain of this in a liter of water. But if you add it all up together, the estimated quantity of uranium in the ocean is 4.5 billion metric tons, which is in billions, not millions, like the uranium deposits we have. So if we can extract the uranium out of the ocean, which we have the tech for, it's just not cost effective yet, which will matter less when it's our only option. This puts us up to a 12,937 year supply of nuclear fuel. But what if we're still worried? What if we're like, whoa, 12,000 years? I plan on having kids who plan on having kids. So, 12,000 years down the line, what are we going to leave our grandkids with? So if you look back at our nuclear power plants, the majority of them today are what they call LWR plants, which stands for light water reactors. Again, they work by shooting some neutrons into fuel, which has a bunch of water coolant to create a fission chain reaction, which splits up a bunch of uranium items and generates, energy along with some byproducts. This is apparently as cool as it sounds, a wildly inefficient way to harvest the energy of uranium. As I mentioned a little earlier, you can like recover some of the spent fuel for energy, but it actually goes a bit further than that. They have what they call a breeder reactor, which you can even retrofit some of these existing reactors to become. And basically what this breeder reactor do, it modifies a process where the output of the fission process is actually more fissile material than you started with. So basically you shoot some neutrons to start this fission reaction, and you end up with more material to create fission with than what you started with. I admittedly got a little lost on the exact mechanism this process functions. Like, the clearest explanations I could find involved a literal spiderweb diagram of reactions. Like, it goes from like uranium-239 to uranium-238 to plutonium to like thorium, and then like it lists those all across, and then there's like 5 more rows of reactions with just like all different colored arrows pointing from one way to the other and looping around back to the beginning. But basically the takeaway of these breeder reactors is that the process can extract nearly 100% of the energy latent in the uranium, while the light water reactors extract less than 1% of that energy. So you can take this 12,937 year fuel supply and turn it into 1.3 million years of fuel, which for now is acceptable.
What about my great 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 great
What about my dinosaur elders down the line? Yeah. If we make it 1.3 million years in an entirely nuclear powered world, yeah, we're gonna have to start looking at like some fossil fuels, which at 1.3 million years later we'll have generated a whole bunch of new ones. We can just harvest our ancestor soup and go back to fossil fuels. One last thing I want to just touch on, because we are talking about nuclear power, not in my backyard. Obviously, we're going to need to dispose of our nuclear waste somehow, and that's what everyone really doesn't like to hear about. Generally, though, like, the solution to disposing radioactive waste is to just bury it and forget about it forever. We've got a lot of earth to bury things in. Like, you don't even need that much. Like, you need, 10, 20 feet of earth and put it underneath that, and really, you don't have to worry. You want to get under and away from, like, anything that's mobile, like underwater water. Underground water. Sorry. Underground water, not underwater water.
Every water is underwater water, except for the surface.
Yeah. So there's really not like anything we have to change about how we get rid of our radioactive stuff. And we're not really going to run out of places to put it. Like, you could just dig more holes.
I mean, we'll run out eventually, in the millions of years.
No, not really. Like, because it's so energy dense, like, you're not using a lot of fuel to generate all this energy. So the volume of stuff that we're going to have is not that much. Like, I didn't do the actual math out on what we extract from the ocean, but, we have 5.5 million metric tons of uranium. It's not like there's, that there's going to be islands made entirely of uranium that we're harvesting. Uranium is a trace element. So even if you do 1,000 times the trace element, you can just throw it under like Rhode Island or something, I'm sure. And there's an interesting quirk with the breeder reactor byproducts as well. So a typical light water reactor nuclear waste, right, just has a whole bunch of different nasty radioactive elements in it and stays hot for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, and you just gotta hide it. By happenstance, there's no elements in the end result of a breeder reactor with a half-life between 90 and 200,000 years. So the half-life is either 90 or less, or 200,000 or more. So for those who don't know, the half-life of an element is basically the measure of how long it takes for half of that radioactive mass to decay. So radioactive stuff is unstable, it shoots off energy, and basically the rate at which it shoots off energy and becomes a more stable element is the half-life. A shorter half-life means that it's happening pretty quickly. These are the more dangerous elements. The elements that have a 200,000 year half-life, yeah, they're going to stay radioactive effectively forever, but it doesn't matter because they decay so slowly they're not a safety hazard. So that means after, a couple hundred years, because 90 years only gets rid of half of the waste, and then it'll be, half as strong. But after a couple hundred years, after you go through like 2 or 3 half-lives, that waste is going to be pretty much safe, because everything that's quickly decays is going to be done, and everything else in there is on the scale of 200,000 years. So you can even cycle out this waste disposal. So basically, my conclusion here is we should just use some more nuclear power, guys. It's pretty fucking good. It's basically magic. It's just the numbers are so much better than burning dinosaurs. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
It's better than the 690 people to power one home.
Yeah, I mean, what you could do to alleviate that, Chris, is you talked about, like, that's kind of prisoner work. So we just have to make sure we arrest 690 out of every 695 people to make sure we have enough to power our homes.
And then feed them bananas.
Feed them bananas, yes, so that they have some dignity.
Right. I like bananas.
Well,
Arrest
guess
me.
who's getting arrested? All right, that does it for the energy talk. Let's hop on to our would you rather question of the day.
Are you ready for the would you rather question?
Who is?
Marcus, I guess.
Okay, me.
I'm pretty much always going to pick Marcus because you never get to go first.
It's fun.
Would you rather never be able to wear pants or never be able to wear shoes?
Ooh. All right, I'm gonna start and say I broadly interpret shoes to include flip-flops, sandals, like all the
anything
non-shoes shoes.
Anything
like
covering your feet, I guess.
socks. You get socks. I think you get socks.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
You get socks, but no socks that are too close to shoes. Like nothing that your feet are unprotected. I'll say that. Like nothing that has like a rubber sole on the bottom or.
I mean, socks protect your feet too.
Socks protection. Yeah, you can have thick socks, but they can get nasty. And then the other is
pants.
So clearly underpants are unaffected because they are by definition underpants.
Yes, you have underpants.
You have underpants, but you can't use like shorts. I'm going to include shorts as pants.
Yep. Okay, that's fair.
What about like leggings? Leggings are pants?
Anything that goes over your underpants, I would say.
By definition, if they're over underpants, they are pants.
Yeah.
By the transitive property, anything over underpants. All right, I'm trying to find any reason why it's shoe. Like it's like why? Where is it acceptable to not have pants?
Technically, the signs only say no shirt, no shoes, no service.
Yeah, they don't say nothing about pants. So you can go into a restaurant.
Is there any place where it's worse not to have shoes than not to have pants?
Well, I mean, any situation where you need to do physical stuff, where like, because like shoes is the practical answer. Like you need shoes. Like it's not a social thing; it's a practical thing.
I don't know if you can divide that line and say that being able to wear pants is impractical. Like it's about practicality because it's pretty impractical not to have pants because you can't go a lot of places. Yes, because of social, but practical social.
Yeah, I mean, if socially, if it was acceptable, if everyone did it, then it would be fine. But if everyone didn't wear shoes, then it wouldn't be fine.
Question: can you wrap a towel around your waist?
Well, is that over underpants? Oh, what if you don't have it? But it's not if you don't have underpants.
This is true.
I don't know. That's a gray area.
Because I was thinking if you could live, in like a beachfront area, you could just walk around in underpants with a towel under your waist and not like you always came out of the ocean.
That is true. And most people wouldn't question it.
But you also could walk around without shoes, and that might just be easier.
You don't have to really hide it if you're not wearing shoes. I mean, some places don't let you in if you don't have shoes on, but more people don't let you in if you don't have pants on.
All right, I think I may have found an actual no shoes is worse than no pants situation. On a very hot, sunny day, it is painful to be on like concrete without shoes on. Like it'll burn your feet. But not wearing pants would be kind of nice.
Yeah, it's literally like just in your backyard doing like a home project with no guests. Is the shoes better than the pants? So
you wouldn't actually like get in trouble legally if you have underpants on, right?
Legally, you could. I think it's gonna be a little bit of a gray area, but if you're the dude who just never wears pants, I don't think you get away with that.
Well, if it's a gray area, you should probably get some new tighty whities.
Like if you have like boxers instead of tighty whities, people might like. They don't really look like shorts, but if people aren't really looking that closely, they might think it's shorts.
Yeah, people wear short shorts now. It's possible.
If you work at a strip club where your job doesn't require you have pants.
Or shoes.
Yeah, but basically, like, if you remove the need for pants ever, and then you just get shoes as a bonus.
Okay, on an update on the legal situation, apparently most places, the, like, public indecency statutes involve, like, showing genitals.
So I don't think you can legally get arrested.
Yeah, you could be asked to leave an establishment because pantslessness is not a protected category as far as I know.
But as long as you're in a public area, you're fine, probably.
Yeah. People may not like you, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot contrive a situation where it's even like moving the needle away from just no shoes. Like being barefoot, one, is a lot more acceptable, and two, you do get calluses and will get used to not wearing shoes eventually.
You will.
And you have socks in emergency cases. I don't like driving without shoes.
Yeah, I was trying to imagine what it would be like to drive without shoes.
it's not great.
I've never done it.
It's fine. Like I'll do it in the summer if I have just flip flops with me, because I think it's safer to drive barefoot than with flip flops on.
Yeah, probably.
Because there's a risk of your flip flops getting trapped up around different pedals and things. Safety tip from Absurd Hypotheticals here. Real safety tip: just have an extra set of shoes in your car. That's what I actually do now. But yeah, that's just about it. Like minor inconveniences not having shoes. You get kicked out of some places still, but those same places are definitely going to kick you out for not having pants. Pretty clear cut to me. Boating. Final answer: no shoes.
Okay, Ben?
Yeah, I'm gonna go no shoes. I just can't, like, the hot day thing is technically a consideration, but it's just you gotta go no shoes.
I agree. Shoes. I was thinking that I was going to go with the practical answer and say that I want shoes because functionality, but then you're right. Like, the social aspect is a practical thing, and it comes up way more often. And your body will adapt to having not shoes.
Yeah, so if you have a better would you rather than that stinker, you can send that over to absurdhypotheticals@gmail.com. And it doesn't have to even be a would you rather. If you have a good idea for a question for a whole episode, send it to that same email address, absurdhypotheticals@gmail.com. Really easy to remember. It's just the name of the show, @gmail.com. And we are more than happy to consider, and use listener questions for our episodes, so you can be part of making the show.
We've done it in the past. We
have done it in the past.
Whole episodes based on user questions or listener questions.
And guess what? They were awesome because people think differently than we do, and we come up with all these questions for the most part. So it's going to bring fresh new life into the show, and it'll be all your fault. Other than that, leave a review. That's another way to help the show. Having lots of good reviews lets us pop up higher on search engines and all those types of things. Helps grow the show, helps grow the audience, helps us keep making it for you. And the most direct financial way to help the show is by becoming a patron. Go to www.patreon.com/absurdhypotheticals and become a patron. For just a singular $1 a month, you get access to all our bonus content that we make exclusively for our patrons, our very, very good Hypothetipals. And there's lots of good stuff there to find.
The most direct way to support us financially is to hunt us down in person and then give us cash so we don't have to pay taxes.
Yeah, that's going to be Chris Yee is the one you're going to be looking for. Don't bother tracking me. I'm moving soon, so you're going to have to, you're going to start the progress, start your work, and have to start all over again. You're going to waste your time. So please stalk Chris or Ben. Their real names are right at the head of the show in the intro if you need to hear them again. And you can listen to that exact information again next week when we answer the following question. What if all continents were connected?